I stayed late at work. The cleaning lady looked at me strangely, then quietly put a note on the table. When you go home, go down the fire escape. I listened to her and froze at what I saw there. Before I start, I have a small request for you. Write from which corner of the world you are listening to us. For me, it is always a special moment. Pleasant listening. The clock in the right corner of the monitor showed 11:15 when Eugenia finally broke away from the quarterly report, in which the numbers did not correspond with the planned indicators by sums that made her return again and again to the initial tables. The 18th floor of the business center had long since emptied. No noise of keyboards, no muffled telephone conversations, just the hum of the air conditioning and the distant noise of the night city behind the glass wall. Maxim had sent a message earlier during the day. The flight to Sochi was at 16:40. The negotiations would last 3 days. He would miss her. She replied with a heart and went back to work, unsuspecting that in a few hours her life would be divided into before and after. Elizabeta Arkadyevna appeared in the doorway around 10 o'clock, pushing a cart with buckets and mops. She had been working in the building for 9 years, and in all this time, Eugenia had heard nothing from her except a whispered good evening and goodbye. A woman past 50, with tight lips and the hunched back of a person used to not looking up. She was part of the decor, just like the water dispenser in the hallway or the ficus at the reception. But today, something had changed. At first, Eugenia paid no attention. The cleaning lady was methodically wiping the surface of the neighboring desk, although it had been empty for a week already after Ina's resignation from accounting. Then she moved to Eugenia's desk and began to wipe the edge with the cloth, where Eugenia certainly hadn't spilled coffee. The movements were mechanical, almost obsessed, and her gaze darted toward Eugenia in short, frightened stings, like a thief. "Elizabeta Arkadyevna, are you feeling unwell?" Eugenia asked, looking up from the screen. "Maybe I can bring you some water." She didn't answer. She continued to scrub the edge of the table with such fierceness, as if she wanted to wipe it away along with the layer of varnish. Eugenia opened her mouth to repeat the question, but then the cleaning lady rushed toward her, unexpectedly fast for her age, and put something in her palm. Her fingers were cold as ice, and in her eyes, when their gazes finally met, Eugenia saw not just fatigue, but an animalistic, primal terror of a hunted being. 1 second later, Ovchinnikova was already pushing the cart toward the elevator without looking back. Eugenia opened her fist, a crumpled piece of paper torn from a notebook, 2 sentences scratched in pencil. "When you leave, go down the fire escape. Do not use the elevator." The first thought was, the old woman has lost her mind. The second, that in 9 years she had never joked, never smiled, never spoken first to any of the employees. And the third, from which her chest went cold, that look. That is how people look who know something terrible and cannot remain silent. Eugenia stayed in front of the monitor for another half an hour, pretending to work, but actually listening to every sound. Then she turned off the computer, took her bag, and headed for the fire exit at the end of the hall. The door opened with a prolonged creak. Behind it lay the concrete shaft, lit by rare emergency lamps, and the staircase descending into darkness. She took off her high-heeled shoes and put them in her bag. On the concrete steps, every step resonated with an echo that seemed deafening in that silence. On the platform between the first floor and the underground parking, Eugenia heard voices. Pressing herself against the cold wall, she stopped breathing. From below came a hoarse male bass, rude and threatening, and some stifled sighs. "What, are you stupid, old woman? Do you not understand Russian?" the man snarled. "Mind your own business. Wash the floors, wipe the dust, and don't let me see you in this sector again. Understood?" "I didn't say anything," Elizaveta Arkadyevna's voice was trembling, choked. I swear to you, no one knows a word. If you want your son to make it to next month, shut your mouth and forget you saw anything. Get out. The iron door slammed. Hurried steps and the shuffling of rubber soles moved away in the opposite direction. Eugenia stood pressed against the corner. Her palms were sticky with cold sweat. The note had not been the paranoia of a lonely old woman. Something was happening in this building, something for which a harmless cleaning lady was being intimidated and her family threatened. After waiting about 5 minutes, she went down barefoot into the parking lot. The vast space was flooded with the dead light of fluorescent lamps. Between the concrete columns, the silhouettes of cars left overnight could be glimpsed. Eugenia slipped along the wall, trying to stay in the shadows, until she reached Sector B, and there she froze, unable to take another step. Maxime's black sedan, their number. She herself had chosen her 3 years ago, the husband who should now have been 1,000 kilometers away, in a hotel in Sochi, after a long flight. A woman stepped out of the car. Young, about 26 years old, no more. Tall, in a sober dress of the kind worn on glossy magazine covers. Her face expressed a cold, almost disgusted superiority, and she moved the way people move who are used to the world stepping aside for them. And then Maxime came out, her husband, the man with whom she had lived for 6 years, shared a bed, made plans, in whom she had trusted unconditionally. He didn't hug that woman, didn't kiss her. He ran to her, ran like a puppy to its master, and took her bag with both hands. She passed the object to him with an expression of boredom, without even looking at him. Then she said something. Eugenia didn't hear the words, and Maxime dropped to one knee right on the dirty concrete of the parking lot to tie her shoelace. The stranger looked down at him, without tenderness, without passion, with that indifferent contempt with which one looks at servants. Then she took a folder out of her bag and slapped him negligently across the cheek. Not hard, but humiliating. The gesture by which a trainer shows the animal its place. Maxime accepted this in silence. His face was pale, his lips pressed into a thin line. The woman headed for the VIP elevator, and her husband walked mincingly behind her, hunched over, carrying the strange bag like a queen's page. Eugenia didn't know how long she sat on the cold floor behind the column. Tears flowed down her cheeks, but she didn't wipe them away. This wasn't jealousy. She would have preferred jealousy. She would have preferred to see a passionate kiss between secret lovers. What she had seen was more frightening than betrayal. Total, absolute submission. Slavery. Who is this woman? What power does she have over the man Eugenia considered her support? The phone vibrated in her bag. Message from Maxime. I landed. The flight was delayed by 2 hours. I'm tired as a dog. Going to the hotel. Tomorrow is a hard day. I love you. She looked at the screen and the letters blurred before her eyes. Eugenia didn't go home. She wandered through Moscow at night until dawn, without seeing the road, until the tank indicated the last quarter. Then she sat in a non-stop cafe near the Kievskaya station, warming her hands on the cardboard cup and watching the city wake up beyond the window. When she opened the apartment door, around 9 in the morning, Maxime was already there. Eugenia, he took a step toward her, opening his arms. I missed you so much. Why weren't you answering calls? His chest was so warm and familiar. She buried her face in his jacket and smelled a deep, woody scent with notes of expensive tobacco. The same perfume that had enveloped her when the young woman had passed by her hiding place in the parking lot. My phone died, Eugenia said. How was the flight? Normal, just that the flight was delayed. Look, I brought you a gift. He handed her a box. Inside was a shawl of the softest cashmere, milky gray with a slight pearly sheen. A beautiful thing. On the box, the label with the GUM logo was visible. Where did you get it? At the airport in Adler. There's a decent shop there in the departures area. He was lying to her face, looking her straight in the eyes, and smiling with the same smile she had loved for 6 years. While Maxime was showering, Eugenia opened his suitcase. Inside, everything was folded carefully. Shirts, trousers, a toiletry bag. Not a single wrinkled item, no trace of use. He had packed the suitcase for show and had never opened it. She took his phone, dialed the password, their car number, the last 4 digits she herself had chosen. Incorrect password. She tried the date of their first date. Incorrect password. The sound of water stopping came from the bathroom. Eugenia put the phone back and went out onto the balcony so he wouldn't see her face. The next morning, the first thing she did was look for Elizabeta Arkadyevna. In her place, she found a girl of some 20-something years, lively, talkative. "Oh, Ovsiniakova took leave," she announced without looking up from the mop. "She called yesterday. Her voice was trembling. She could barely speak. She said family problems. Son has some problems with debts." "When is she coming back?" "In about 3 days, maybe more." "Can you call her if it's urgent?" Eugenia didn't have Ovsiniakova's number. She went down to security. The head of security, Perepylkin, sat at a desk full of papers and, at her appearance, gathered himself together, as if caught on the wrong foot. "Vasily Ilyich, I need to see the camera recordings from the parking lot from the night before last, Sector B." "The recordings?" He rubbed his chin. "On what date? Tell me." She named the date. "Well," he frowned, avoiding her gaze. "The cameras in sectors B and V were under maintenance, planned. Nothing was recorded." "Very opportune maintenance." "Well, the schedule," he threw up his hands. And in this gesture there was so much falseness that a shiver went through her. "But the guard who was on shift that night?" "I saw him on the stairs. I wanted to ask him something." Perepylkin jumped from his chair with an agility she didn't expect from him. "Surkov? Well, he resigned this morning. He left for relatives in the region. I can't give you his personal number. It's not allowed." Eugenia looked at him, and he averted his eyes like a guilty schoolboy. "Thank you, Vasily Ilyich. You helped me very much." When the door closed behind her, she already knew. It is useless to look for the truth here. Someone had wiped all traces in a single night. All day, Eugenia sat in front of the monitor, looking at the numbers of the quarterly report, which now seemed completely different to her. The data from Maxim's department, the same ones she signed without looking because she trusted her husband, were full of oddities. Protocol expenses inflated to indecency, consulting contracts with ghost companies, OO Vector, OO Horizont, OO Meridian, names behind which there was nothing but bank accounts. How many years had she put her signature on these papers? Looking around at the empty office, Eugenia inserted a stick into the USB port and began copying the files. Her hands were trembling, although she wasn't doing anything illegal. They were the documents of her own department. But the feeling was as if she were committing a theft in her own house. When the copy indicator reached 100%, she removed the stick and left it at the bottom of her bag, under the makeup kit and the bunch of keys. For 6 years, Eugenia had prided herself on the company's transparency, its impeccable reputation, the honesty the management appreciated. Now, looking at the glittering screen with tables, she understood. If everything comes to light, her very signature stands under every one of these documents. She herself will be made the scapegoat, the naive wife who noticed nothing, or worse, the accomplice who covered for her husband. The feeling of guilt suffocated her, mixing with a cold, calculated fear. But there was something else, too, a strange sensation, close to enthusiasm. She was no longer the victim crying behind the concrete columns of the parking lot. She was a hunter, and she had the first evidence. Eugenia spent 3 days in a state of maximum tension, coming to work every morning before everyone else and leaving later, just to reduce the time spent in the apartment where she had to smile at the man who cooked her dinner and told her jokes, unaware of the stick hidden in the box of tampons in the bathroom. The stick burned her conscience. Error numbers, contracts, names of ghost firms. But all these were just disparate pieces of a mosaic that Eugenia still couldn't assemble. On the fourth day, she bumped into Elizaveta Arkadyevna in the women's restroom. Ovsyannikova stood at the sink, looking in the mirror with an absent gaze, and looked as if insomnia hadn't left her for several days. Gaunt face, dark circles under her eyes, hunched shoulders. Of the formerly silent but robust woman, only a shell remained. At the sight of Eugenia, she flinched and rushed toward the door, but Eugenia managed to block her path. "Elizaveta Arkadyevna, wait, please. I have nothing to tell you." The cleaning lady's voice was hoarse, broken. "Leave me alone, I have work. I know about your son." Ovsyannikova froze, and in her eyes flashed something resembling hope or despair. These two feelings are sometimes impossible to distinguish. "How do you know?" "I heard the conversation on the stairs." "Of that man who was threatening you." Eugenia lowered her voice to a whisper. "I am not an enemy, Elizaveta Arkadyevna. I am a victim just like you. My husband is not who he pretends to be." Long pause. Ovsyannikova studied her face, trying to discern a trap. "At lunch," she finally uttered. "Technical floor, behind the ventilation installations. No one hears there." The technical floor greeted Eugenia with the roar of air conditioners and drafts wandering among the bulky aggregates, covered in dust and cobwebs. Ovsyannikova was already waiting in the far corner, behind a massive air duct, clutching a worn bag to her chest. "Your husband is not just unfaithful," she began without introduction, and every word fell heavy, like a stone in a well. "He works for very dangerous people, launders money through fictitious accounts, transfers it abroad." "How do you know?" "My son knew." Ovsyanikova's lips began to tremble. "Vladimir worked for 2 years in the company as a driver. He often drove your husband. A good, honest boy. When he understood that he was transporting not just documents, but evidence of crimes, he wanted to go to the police. And then they—" She didn't finish, but Eugenia understood anyway. "They accused him of theft from the warehouse, planted evidence, found witnesses. Vladimir is now in the colony near Ryazan, sitting for the sins of others." Ovsyannikova took an old push-button phone out of her bag, the kind that went out of fashion long ago. "He managed to hide this before the arrest. He recorded a conversation." With trembling fingers, she pressed the play button. At first, rustling, muffled voices. Then Eugenia heard the familiar timbre, and the world around her began to collapse. Maxime's voice, but not that warm and soft voice with which he said, "Good morning, I love you." Cold, official, with a note of scornful sneer. "The Swiss accounts have been cleared. Now they will go through the firm in Cyprus."
The Inima Buna, Good Heart Foundation. The ideal cover. No one digs into charity. Another voice, unknown. "But won't your wife suspect?" And Maxim's answer, which cut her legs out from under her. "My wife is in finance. She has blind trust. I shove papers under her nose. She signs without reading. If anything comes to light, she will be the scapegoat, and will wipe the slate clean without problems." The phone slipped from her hands and hit the concrete floor. Eugenia didn't notice. She stared into the void, and the words pounded in her head. "She has blind trust. She will be the scapegoat. Will wipe the slate clean without problems." 6 years. For 6 years, she had slept next to the man who planned to send her to prison in his place. "Help us." Ovsyannikova sat down next to her on the cold concrete, and tears flowed down her cheeks. "You are educated, smart. You can find proof. Save my son. Save yourself." Eugenia didn't remember how she got to the car. She didn't remember how she dialed Marina's number. She only remembered her voice in the receiver. Calm, gathered, professional. "Come to me immediately." Marina Larentseva's office was located in a quiet alley, not far from the Chistya Prudy ponds,
in an old mansion converted into a law office. They had been friends since college, and in 15 years, Eugenia had never seen her friend lost. But now, listening to the tangled accounts of the note, the parking lot, the audio recording, Marina went white in the face. "Eugenia, do you understand what you've gotten yourself into? Explain it to me." Marina stood up, walked around the office, stopped at the window. "You are the financial director of the company where your husband runs schemes. You are his lawful wife. If he launders money through the charity foundation and you sign the documents, legally you are an accomplice. Article 174, in conjunction with fraud and participation in a criminal group." "It's a real sentence, Eugenia, serious." "But I didn't know." "So prove it." Marina turned to her, and in her eyes there was not a drop of compassion, only the cold calculation of the lawyer. Of Sinyakova's recording is the words of a convict's mother who desperately wants to get her son out. Any prosecutor will tear it to shreds. If you go to the police now, do you know what will happen? Maxim and his people will destroy the evidence in one day, hide the assets, and present you as a hysteric taking revenge on her husband for infidelity. Eugenia was silent, feeling the walls of the office closing in, squeezing her like a vice. What should I do? Marina sat down opposite, took her hands. Go back home, smile, make him breakfast, and ask him how his day went, and in parallel look for the primary source, the black accounting, the list of accounts, the scheme of money flows. You want me to live with the man who... I want you to survive. Marina squeezed her fingers until it hurt. Think about your parents. If you go to prison, that will kill them. Grit your teeth and endure. In the evening, Maxime returned with a bouquet of roses and a bottle of wine. "You're a bit pale today," he observed, kissing her on the temple. "I'm tired. The quarterly report is finishing me." Eugenia forced herself to smile. "You know how it is." I know. Come on, I'll prepare dinner and you rest." She watched him bustle about the kitchen, humming something under his breath, and thought, "This man planned for 6 years to send me to prison, and now he cuts vegetables for salad and smiles." When he went into the shower, she searched his briefcase. The second phone, the one he had mentioned as being for work for VIP clients, turned out to be suspiciously empty. No messages, no calls, no contacts. Someone cleaned it carefully after every use, but in the bin of deleted photos, Eugenia found a blurry picture, a handwritten list with names and numbers next to them, sums in millions. The water stopped running in the bathroom. She feverishly shoved the phone back into the briefcase and grabbed a book from the coffee table. Maxim came out in a robe, hair still damp. "What are you reading? A detective novel?" She showed the cover, without seeing the title. "About financial schemes, can you imagine? It's kind of boring, but it catches you." He snorted and lay down next to her, embracing her waist. Eugenia lay motionless, fighting the nausea rising in her throat. 1 week later, Maxime announced a new delegation, this time to St. Petersburg, for 3 days. He left early in the morning, kissing her hurriedly on the cheek, and forgot his personal laptop on the desk in the study. Eugenia waited until midnight, drew the curtains, left only the desk lamp on. The computer asked for a password. Wedding date, incorrect. The year they met, incorrect. 3 attempts remained. She sat in the dark, rummaging through her memory for everything she knew about her husband. He was sentimental, superstitious. His mother had died when he was 18, and he still carried her photograph in his wallet. Eugenia entered the mother-in-law's death date. The screen blinked and opened. In the hidden folder Backups 2024, she found files with code names S, Real Estate, Virtual, Flow. File D turned out to be a detailed table of the money flows of the Inima Buna Foundation, the same one Eugenia had once prided herself on. The numbers told a terrible story. Real donations almost didn't exist. Instead, monthly sums between 200 and 500 million entered from anonymous foreign accounts. The money left on fictitious contracts with OOO Vector, Horizon, Meridian. But the most terrible thing awaited her in the folder with scanned documents. Payment authorization contract for 40 million. In the financial director rubric stood her signature. Smooth, elegant, without mistake. Hers. Eugenia could swear she had never seen this document. It means either it was a forgery or Maxim had slipped it into the stack of papers she signed in a hurry after some exhausting meeting. In the profit distribution list, she noticed an oddity. Maxim, 30%. Samoylov, 30%. The doorbell repeated, insistent, imperative. She tiptoed to the door and looked through the peephole. Courier. A young boy in a uniform jacket with a box in his hands. Delivery for Sernikov. You have the wrong address, she breathed through the door. Sernikov lives 1 floor up. The footsteps moved away. Eugenia returned to the computer. 98%. 99%. Done. She took out the stick and put it in her robe pocket, and then the lock of the front door clicked. Maxime stood in the hall, checking raindrops off his jacket. The flight was cancelled, he threw out. The weather isn't for flying. On the laptop screen, the folders with compromising material were open. Eugenia grabbed the glass of water from the nightstand and knocked it over onto the keyboard. The screen flickered and went out. Maxim entered the office and froze on the threshold, looking at the wet laptop. What are you doing? I was thirsty. Her voice sounded strange, false. My hand trembled, the glass tipped over. Forgive me, I didn't mean to. He looked at her long, searchingly, and in his eyes there was neither warmth nor care, only the cold calculation of a predator evaluating its prey. The computer was on. No, I don't know your password. Pause. The silence pressed on the ears. Maxim silently took the laptop, wiped the keyboard with a napkin, and left the room, throwing over his shoulder, "Next time, don't touch my things." 2 days later, Eugenia bought a phone with a prepaid SIM card and called Marina from the park, far from possible interceptions. I found something about the girl in the parking lot, Marina said without introduction. Her name is Angelina Romanovskaya, 26 years old. She studied in London, returned 2 years ago. She's not a mistress, Eugenia. She is the adopted daughter and right hand of Robert Samoylov, the head of the holding. Eugenia was silent, trying to process what she heard. Romanovskaya controls the network of shell companies, the real estate, the fictitious funds, the offshores. Remember the letter R in the distribution list who receives 40%? That is her. Maxime is just an executor, and the true boss is this young lady. And then the scene in the parking lot took on a completely different meaning. Maxime on his knees, the negligent slap, the servile submission afterwards. He wasn't humbling himself before a mistress. He was afraid. He was afraid of a young woman who held in her hands not just his career, but probably his life too. Eugenia stood in the middle of the alley, looking at the bare branches of the trees, and understood. She was not facing a banal infidelity, nor even a swindling and cowardly husband. Her adversary was a professional criminal from the world of expensive suits and charity receptions, an educated, calculated, and absolutely ruthless woman who would stop at nothing to protect her empire. This was no longer a fight for marriage, nor revenge for betrayal. It was a fight for life, and the enemy turned out to be more frightening than Eugenia could have imagined. Maxime handed her the invitation to the charity evening at the Metropole at breakfast, placing the envelope negligently next to the cup. And Eugenia understood. It is impossible to refuse. The Inima Buna Foundation, that screen through which millions were laundered, was organizing the annual reception for the financial elite, and the absence of the commercial director's wife would have raised unnecessary questions. "You will wear the dress I gave you for our anniversary," Maxim said, without looking up from his phone. Important people will be there. What kind of people? Samomayev will surely be there, and his assistant. He pronounced the last word with a slight stumble, and Eugenia understood who he was talking about. In the hall flooded with the light of crystal chandeliers, among tuxedos and evening gowns, it smelled of expensive perfume and lots of money.
Waiters glided among guests with trays of champagne, and from a corner came the sounds of a live orchestra playing something classical, discreet. A corpulent man with a shock of gray hair approached them, Robert Vladlenovich Samoilovich, and Eugenia noticed how her husband's posture changed instantly. His shoulders slumped, his back curved slightly. A fawning smile appeared on his face. Next to Samoilovich, in a provocative red dress, stood Angelina Romanovskaya, the same woman from the parking lot. "Here is our Maxim with his charming wife." Samoilovich patted the husband on the shoulder with the familiarity of a master praising his faithful dog. "They say at your finance department everything is in ideal order."
A smart wife is half the success, isn't it? Eugenia sketched a forced smile, feeling Romanovskaya's searching gaze upon her, cold, evaluating, like a buyer at the market looking at goods of dubious quality. "Very nice to meet you," she uttered. "Likewise." Romanovskaya tilted her head slightly, and in her voice rang a poorly masked mockery. "Maxime has told us so much about you." Later, in the ladies' room with marble countertops and gilded mirrors, they were left alone. Romanovskaya was retouching her lipstick with slow, sure movements of a person used to the whole world waiting. "You have become too curious, Eugenia Alexandrovna." She didn't turn, continuing to look in the mirror. "You leave work early, return home late, stick your nose where you shouldn't. It's unhealthy behavior for a married woman." "I don't understand what you are talking about." "You understand." Romanovskaya finally turned, and in her eyes remained no trace of worldly kindness, only the cold calculation of the predator. A good wife knows her place, knows to turn her back in time when her husband is busy with important matters. If you consider yourself smart, stop resisting. Otherwise, not only you will suffer, but also your parents in the Saratov region. Nice old people, from what I know. Father, a former teacher, mother, a retired nurse, live in their little house on Sadowaya Street. Do you think money allows you everything? Money allows many things, Romanovskaya sneered, putting her lipstick into her tiny bag, including buying lives and deaths, since we are on the subject. Educate your husband better, otherwise I will have to intervene. And then, believe me, there will be no way back for either you or him. She went out, leaving behind a trail of expensive perfume and a threat of ice. And Eugenia stood for a long time at the sink, looking at her reflection and trying to calm the trembling of her hands. The rain whipped a windshield when Eugenia ordered Maxime to stop the car on a deserted embankment. The streetlights reflected in the wet asphalt like yellow spots, and somewhere in the distance a solitary tugboat hummed on the river. "I know everything," she uttered with a voice she didn't expect from herself, icy, alien. "About the money laundering, about the fake signatures, about the fact that you wanted to make me the scapegoat so you could come out clean." Maxime paled. His shoulders began to tremble. "Eugenia, it's not what you think." "Let me explain." "Then explain. You have 5 minutes." And he explained, tangled, swallowing words, jumping from one thing to another. About 90 million rubles debt after some failed investments. He had been sure he found a gold mine, had invested everything he had, borrowed from people who do not forgive non-payment. About the night visit of 3 men who showed him photos of his father and wife, demanding he return the money in 1 week or die. About Samoilov, who appeared as a savior, paid the debt, but in exchange turned him into a slave. "I thought it was temporary," his voice was breaking. 1 year, max 2. I earn and get us both out. I take you from here, somewhere to Portugal or Argentina. We start over? The documents with my signature? Samoylov's requirements. He needed a person with an impeccable reputation for cover. And you chose me, your own wife. I wanted to protect you, his voice cracked into a shout, to earn for the escape, to hide money, so that later, your way of protection condemned me to years in prison if everything came to light. He was silent, forehead pressed against the steering wheel, and his shoulders shook with soundless sobs. In front of her sat not a cold-blooded criminal, but a pathetic, broken man, a gambler blinded by greed who fell into a well and pulled his wife down with him. I will fulfill the last task, he whispered finally. I will extinguish the debt to Samoylov and surrender to the police. I will take all the blame on myself. I will testify against them. I swear to you, you won't suffer anything. I won't allow that. 1 week later, in the evening, when the sunset was fading beyond the window, Maxime returned earlier than usual and embraced her in the kitchen, tight until it hurt, burying his face in her hair. Tomorrow is an important trip, the last transport. If everything goes well, I will be free of them. We will be free. He took out a silver chain with a cylinder pendant, the necklace given on their 2nd anniversary, which she had long ago put in her jewelry box. Wear it always. Don't take it off in the shower or in your sleep. If something happens to me or they come for you, break the pendant. Inside is your insurance, the last way of retreat. Maxim, what do you intend to do? Forgive me for everything. He pressed his lips to her hair, and she felt his cheeks were wet. If there is another life, I will compensate you for everything. I owe you a quiet life, which I stole from you. In the morning, he left without saying goodbye, left only a note on the pillow. I love you, forgive me. Eugenia looked out the window at his car moving away and understood she could wait no longer. The meeting with Lieutenant Colonel Kozyrev from the Economic Security Directorate took place in a discreet cafe on the outskirts, where it smelled of burnt oil and cheap instant coffee. A gray-haired man with attentive eyes and deep wrinkles, who had seen too much. He had been investigating the activities of the Samoylov holding for 2 years and couldn't get close enough. The stick is good, he said, studying the files on the drive she brought. But for a complete accusation, which won't fall in court, we need the originals of the documents, and we must detain your husband during the handover of the goods, in the act. What is required of me? Call him, convince him to return home under any pretext. Eugenia looked at the phone in her hands, and her fingers wouldn't obey. She was asked to become the bait that would lure her own husband into a trap from which there is no exit. I understand how it sounds, added Kozyrev, but if we don't detain him, Samoylov will get rid of him sooner or later. Your husband knows too much. Fine, I will do it. She prepared the last dinner alone. She stood all day at the stove. Remembering the recipes her mother had taught her, she sent the message, "Return for dinner. We need to talk seriously." Maxime arrived 1 hour later, exhausted, face earthy, smelling of alcohol, ate with the greed of a hungry child, praised her food, told some trifles about the weather. When he leaned back on the chair with a happy smile, the front door flew open with a noise. The intervention group burst into the apartment. Men in masks, shouts of "on the floor," noise of metal. Maxime didn't resist, didn't even try to get up. Already in handcuffs, he turned to his wife, who was crying, and on his face appeared a strange smile, sad, but with the relief of a man who has finally gotten rid of an unbearable burden. Forgive me, and thank you. At the trial, Samoylov's lawyer, a slick man in an expensive suit, tried to discredit her. The witness denounced her own husband out of jealousy over his mistress, out of a desire to get her hands on the joint assets. This is the revenge of a spurned woman, not the testimony of an honest citizen. Eugenia stood up, and her voice didn't tremble. I don't need dirty money, Mr. Lawyer. Do you see this woman in the hall? She pointed to Elizaveta Arkadyevna, who sat in the third row, clutching a handkerchief. Her son, Vladimir, has been rotting for 2 years in a colony for the crimes of others because he dared to speak the truth. I am not here out of jealousy. I am here so that no one else suffers, like the Ovsinikov family, like my own family. My husband made a terrible mistake and must pay for it, but at least before the court he chose to do the right thing, gave statements, helped the investigation. Have the accused ever felt remorse? Did they think even for 1 second about those whose lives they destroyed? Silence fell in the hall, and the lawyer, losing his gift of speech, sat down slowly in his place.
Samoilov, 18 years of severe regime. Romanovskaya, 14 years of general regime. Maxim, 6 years, taking into account mitigating circumstances. Vladimir Ovchinnikov, rehabilitated and released. The visiting room in the colony near Ryazan smelled of chlorine and institutional sadness. Through the glass wall, Eugenia looked at Maxim, head shaved, thin in the gray prison uniform, but with a calm, almost reconciled gaze. "Don't wait for me, Eugenia." His voice sounded muffled through the communication device. "Find someone better, who deserves you. Live happily." He took out an envelope with divorce papers and stuck it to the glass. The date of his signature, 1 year ago, when he already understood how it would all end. I knew this day would come. I left the field for your signature blank. If you want to divorce, you will sign. The apartment and savings have long been transferred to your name. It's honest money, earned before all this nightmare. Eugenia looked at the papers, then at the man behind the glass, the one she loved for 6 years, whom she hated, whom she pitied. She didn't tear the papers and didn't start signing. She folded them carefully and put them in her bag, next to the old leather wallet he had given her on their first date. I don't know if I will wait 6 years, she said sincerely. I don't know if we will ever be able to start over. I understand. I have no right to ask, but I know one thing. She pressed her palm to the cold glass, and he covered it with his on the other side. And this touch through the barrier was more bitter than any words. Despite everything, the lies, the betrayal, the fear, she had once been truly loved. She left the colony under the evening sky, furrowed by the stripes of a purple sunset, got into the car, and sat motionless for a long time, looking at the horizon where the clouds melted in the last rays of the passing day. Ahead awaited a long, uncertain, hard road, full of questions without answers. But the sky above her head was no longer dark. Eugenia started the engine, and the car moved slowly to meet a new life, leaving behind 6 years of love, betrayal, and a strange, broken atonement of a man who destroyed her and saved her at the same time.